was sitting on a stiff plastic chair in a doctor's waiting room when my phone buzzed in my hand. The place smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I remember thinking how quiet it felt, too quiet, before I answered the call. Mom, my daughter Angela said. Her voice wasn't warm, it wasn't rushed either. It was flat, almost rehearsed. We're leaving for Europe tomorrow. I sold the beach house and Dad's truck. We needed the money. Take care. The line went dead before I could even speak. For a moment, I just stared at my phone. No tears came. No shock. Just a hollow pressure in my chest like the air had been pulled out of the room. 45 years of raising her. Every sacrifice. Every night I stayed awake worrying about her future. And with one short phone call, I was erased. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old. And until that moment, I truly believed I knew my daughter. 6 months earlier, I had buried my husband, Robert. He died the way he lived, quietly. One moment we were eating breakfast like we had every morning for decades, the next moment he was gone. His last words still echoed in my head. Good morning, my love. After that, Angela suddenly became attentive. She visited often. She helped with groceries, insisted I see a doctor, smiled more than usual. I thought it was care. I thought it was grief bringing us closer. Now I understood. It was preparation. The beach house she sold wasn't just property. It was where Robert and I spent every summer since Angela was a teenager, where birthdays were celebrated, where laughter lived, and the truck, Robert's old pickup, still smelled like him. He washed it every Sunday like it was part of the family. Angela knew what those things meant to me, yet she sold them without asking. The nurse called my name, but I barely heard her. I stood, walked into the exam room, nodded through the doctor's questions, smiled when he said I was healthy for my age. None of it mattered. As I waited for the bus afterward, since apparently I no longer owned a car, I felt something unexpected settle inside me. Calm. Because Angela didn't know everything. 3 days before Robert died, he handed me a thick manila envelope. Put this in your dresser, he told me. If something happens to me, open it when you're ready. I had forgotten all about it. But now, standing at the bus stop, I remembered. And for the first time since my husband's death, I smiled. Because my daughter thought she had left me with nothing, but she had no idea what was waiting for me at home. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. I sat by the window, watching the city drift past, shops opening, people rushing, lives continuing as if nothing had changed. Everyone had their own worries, their own secrets. I had just discovered mine. When I reached my house, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I went straight to the bedroom I had shared with Robert for nearly half a century. The air still carried traces of him. Coffee, soap, old paper. I opened my dresser drawer slowly, as if afraid the memory itself might vanish. The envelope was still there, exactly where I'd placed it months ago. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Robert's handwriting was on the front, steady, familiar, comforting. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed where we had whispered plans for the future, where we had argued, laughed, and grown old together. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. I opened the envelope. Inside were documents, many of them, deeds, bank certificates, legal papers I didn't fully understand. And on top of it all, a handwritten letter from Robert. My dear Antonia, it began. If you're reading this, I'm no longer beside you. I'm sorry I kept things from you, but I wanted to protect you. My heart pounded as I continued reading. Robert explained that over the years he had invested quietly. Every extra dollar, every sacrifice, properties, businesses, accounts I never knew existed. The beach house was only one piece, one small piece of what he had built. My breath caught when I read the next line. You are the sole owner of everything. I felt dizzy. There were papers showing ownership of multiple properties, houses, a coastal motel, a downtown apartment complex. One address made my stomach tighten. It was the building where Angela and her husband lived. According to the documents, Robert had owned it for over 10 years through a company I'd never heard of. And I was the only beneficiary. I covered my mouth as tears finally came, but these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of realization. The man I thought I knew, the quiet bus driver who lived modestly, had been planning for my safety all along. You always trusted too easily, Robert had written. I didn't want our daughter to change once she knew what we had. The irony was unbearable. Angela had betrayed me, believing I was helpless, poor, and alone. In reality, I was far from it. That night, I barely slept. My phone rang early the next morning. It was Angela. Her voice was sweeter now, controlled. Mom, we transferred your share from the house sale. It's not much, but it should last you for a while. We'll be gone for 6 months, maybe longer. I thanked her calmly. When the call ended, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my daughter had just shown me exactly who she was. And I finally knew exactly who I needed to become. Because while my daughter believed she had secured her future, I was about to take back everything she thought was already gone. That afternoon, I sat alone at the kitchen table with Robert's papers spread out in front of me. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling across numbers so large they didn't feel real. Accounts I never knew existed. Properties I had never visited. A life Robert had built in silence while I worried about coupons and grocery prices. For years, I had believed we were just getting by. Robert had been protecting me. And now he was gone. But his protection remained. The phone rang again later that day. I already knew who it was before I answered. Mom, Angela said, her voice filled with false concern. I hope you're okay. This must all be a lot for you. I assured her I was fine, that I was managing, that I understood why she had to do what she did. She sounded relieved. We'll help you find something smaller when we get back, she added. You don't need such a big house now. A smaller house. As if this one wasn't already mine. After the call, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something far more dangerous. I planned. The next morning, I dressed carefully and walked downtown to the law office, whose name Robert had written in his letter. Mr. Peterson had handled some of Robert's investments. I hadn't realized until now how many there truly were. When I placed the envelope on his desk, his expression changed instantly. Mrs. Brooks, he said quietly, your husband was a very careful man. He explained everything, the company, the properties, the legal structure that made me the sole owner. Then he delivered the final blow. The sale of the beach house was illegal. Your daughter had no authority to sell it. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger, but clarity. We can reverse it immediately, like now, he continued. And we can pursue legal action for fraud. I shook my head. No, I said, not yet. He looked surprised. I don't want confrontation. I want control. I asked him to quietly reclaim the beach house, secure the accounts, and begin transferring full operational authority of all properties into my name, especially the apartment building where Angela lived. And I want no one to know I'm behind it, I added. Mr. Peterson studied me for a moment, then nodded. When I left his office, the city felt different. The streets were the same, the people unchanged, but I was not. At home, I went about my days as usual. I watered the plants, I greeted neighbors. I accepted their pity when they asked how I was surviving after Angela abandoned me. I let them believe the story. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, my world was shifting. One afternoon, Aurora, the neighbor I'd known for decades, asked gently, Antonia, are you going to be okay? I smiled and told her yes. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Because Angela thought she had walked away victorious. But she had no idea the ground beneath her was already beginning to move. And while my daughter enjoyed her European escape, the walls around her comfortable life were quietly closing in. The weeks that followed felt unreal. To the outside world, nothing had changed. I was still the quiet widow who walked to the market every morning and returned home with a small bag of groceries. Neighbors spoke to me softly as if I might break at any moment. They didn't know that every evening I spoke with lawyers and reviewed documents that reshaped my entire reality. Mr. Peterson called me regularly. The beach house sale was officially canceled. The buyers had been refunded. The house was mine again. Next came the properties, accounts unlocked, titles transferred, companies placed fully under my authority. Each update felt like another piece of myself being returned. The most delicate matter was the apartment building. Legally, I had always owned it. Practically, control had been distant, hidden behind layers of paperwork Robert had carefully designed. Now, those layers were being peeled away. Angela still hadn't called. Not once. 3 weeks into her trip, I stood by my window and watched a taxi pull up across the street. Angela and her husband, Edward, were loading suitcases, laughing, talking loudly, dreaming aloud about plans I knew would never happen. They never looked up. They didn't say goodbye. I felt no anger, only disappointment. That night, I made another call. Mr. Peterson, I said calmly, I want the truck back. There was a pause. That will be complicated, he replied. Your daughter sold it legally. She had power of attorney. My stomach dropped. I remembered signing papers after Robert's death. Angela hovering, explaining quickly, telling me it was all routine. I hadn't read a word. Grief makes you careless. But if we can prove deception, he continued, we may have a chance. Then do it, I said. I want everything returned. As the days passed, I learned more than I ever expected. About finances, contracts, leverage. I discovered something else too. Edward was drowning in debt. Loans, credit lines, obligations he had hidden even from Angela. The apartment they lived in had been used as collateral, without his knowledge that he didn't own it. The consequences were inevitable. Then the call came. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Peterson said, your daughter is coming back. I closed my eyes. Apparently, Edward's European business opportunity was nothing more than an escape plan. When the bank started asking questions, he stayed behind. Angela returned alone. The very next day, Aurora came rushing over. Antonia, she whispered. Angela's back. She looked terrible. And something strange. She didn't have her keys. I nodded slowly. That evening, Mr. Peterson called again. I've sent the eviction notice. Ha, he said. 30 days, as required by law. Good, I replied. That night, I didn't sleep. I imagined Angela opening the letter. The confusion, the panic, the realization that her safety net was gone. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt ready, because now she would finally understand what it meant to be abandoned. And the next morning, when my phone rang, I knew my daughter had just discovered the truth she was never prepared to face. The phone rang early the next morning. I didn't rush to answer it. I already knew who it was. Mom, Angela said, breathless, panic leaking through every word. I got a letter. It says I have 30 days to leave my apartment. This has to be a mistake. I pretended to sound confused. An eviction notice? I asked gently. That doesn't make sense. Who sent it? She shuffled papers on the other end. Some company I've never heard of. Robert Investments. Do you know anything about that? Hearing my husband's name nearly made me smile. No, honey, I said calmly. I've never heard of it. There was a long silence. Mom, she whispered. Edward left me. He stayed in Europe. He took the rest of the money and disappeared. I came back to nothing. Nothing. The word echoed in my chest. I'm so sorry, I said softly. And this time, I meant it. I don't know what to do, she continued. The banks are calling. The debts are worse than I thought. I have no job, no savings. And now, I don't even have a home. She hesitated before asking the question I knew was coming. Can I come see you? Of course, I replied. You're always welcome here. When I hung up, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection. I chose a simple gray dress. No jewelry, no makeup. I needed to look exactly like the woman Angela believed me to be. The doorbell rang an hour later. Angela stood there, smaller somehow. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled. Dark circles framed her eyes. The confidence she once carried was gone. Mom, she said quietly. I stepped aside. Come in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had read Robert's letter weeks earlier. Angela stared at her hands. I'm sorry, she said finally, for everything. I treated you terribly. I thought I knew what I was doing. I listened. I let her speak. About Edward's lies, about the fake business, about the debts he hid, about being left alone in a foreign country. I have nowhere else to go, she admitted. If you'll let me stay, just for a while. I reached across the table and took her hand. This is your home, I said. You can stay. Relief flooded her face. She hugged me tightly, clinging like someone who had been drifting at sea. But as I held her, I felt something shift. She believed she had found safety. She had no idea she was standing at the very beginning of her lesson. That night, after she fell asleep in her childhood bedroom, I called Mr. Peterson. She's here, I said. Now we begin the next phase. Because letting my daughter come back wasn't forgiveness. It was the setup for the hardest truth she would ever have to face. Angela moved back into her old room the next morning. She unpacked quietly, carefully, as if afraid to take up too much space. Watching her carry her suitcases down the hallway felt surreal. Just weeks ago, she had been planning a glamorous life overseas. Now she was back in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories she had once dismissed as meaningless. She tried to be helpful. She cooked. She cleaned. She asked permission for everything. Mom, is it okay if I use the washing machine now? Mom, do you need anything from the store? Each question carried guilt. That afternoon, she handed me an envelope. I found this in the apartment, she said. It was among Edward's things. It has your name on it. My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. Inside was a small key and a short letter in Robert's handwriting. If Antonia is reading this, it said, it means Angela is struggling. This key opens a safety deposit box at the downtown branch. Use what's inside wisely. Angela's eyes widened. Dad had a safety deposit box? So it seems, I said softly. The next day, we went to the bank together. Angela was nervous, hopeful. I played the role of the confused widow, letting her lead the conversation. When the box opened, even I felt my breath catch. Jewelry, rings, necklaces, bracelets. Some I recognized as family heirlooms, others I had never seen before. Angela stared as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. This is worth a lot, she whispered. According to the note inside, the collection was valued at nearly $200,000. That evening, Angela spread the jewelry across the table, calculating, researching, planning. We can sell most of it, she said. I can pay off some of Edward's debts. Maybe that will stop the banks. I didn't argue. I needed her to choose this herself. Over the next few days, I watched my daughter make decisions she had never had to make before. She negotiated with jewelers. She counted cash. She prioritized which debts to pay first. She also applied for jobs. One night, she came home exhausted and dropped her bag by the door. I got a job, she said quietly. What kind? Cleaning offices. Night shifts. The silence between us was heavy. I don't want to depend on you forever, she added quickly. I need to fix what I broke. That night, after Angela left for her first shift, I sat alone in the living room and cried. Not because she was suffering, but because she was finally changing. Then the phone rang. It was Mr. Peterson. Mrs. Brooks. He said, we've located Edward, and we have proof he forged Angela's signatures. I closed my eyes. Can you free her from the debts? I asked. Yes, but she must never know who made it possible. Good, I replied. Let her finish the lesson first. Because my daughter thought she was finally paying the price for her mistakes. But she had no idea how close she was to discovering the truth. The days that followed settled into a strange routine. By morning, Angela was exhausted. By night, she left for work wearing a uniform that still felt foreign to her. The woman who once spoke casually about luxury hotels and European investments now worried about bus schedules and grocery prices. And yet, something remarkable was happening. She wasn't complaining. She studied financial documents at the kitchen table, carefully highlighting numbers, making notes. She cooked simple meals and packed leftovers for work. She even set aside a small envelope labeled Mom House Expenses and insisted on contributing what little she earned. I know it's not much, she said one evening, placing the envelope beside my tea, but I don't want to take advantage of you. That word, advantage, told me everything. One night, Aurora stopped by while Angela was at work. She looked around the house, then at me. She's different, Aurora said softly, humbled. Yes, I replied. Life has a way of teaching when we stop listening. Aurora hesitated. Did you ever think about letting her fall this far? I met her eyes. Every day. This says, you own the apartment building, the beach house, everything. Yes, I said, and I've owned it for a long time. She stared at me, eyes wide. You knew all of this when I came back, when I cried, when I worked nights? Yes. Her voice cracked. Why, Mom? I took a deep breath. Because if I had rescued you immediately, you would have learned nothing. You needed to feel what it was like to lose everything, just as I did when you abandoned me. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't look angry. She looked awake. I treated you like you were disposable, she said, and you saved me anyway. I didn't save you with money, I replied. I saved you by letting you save yourself. Mr. Peterson explained that all legal matters were resolved. No debts, no claims. A clean slate. Angela sat silently for a long moment. Can I quit my job? She asked finally. Yes, I said. But I hope you won't. She nodded slowly. I won't. As we left the office, she held my hand, not like a frightened child, but like an equal. I see you now, Mom, she said. Not just as my mother, but as a woman. That night, she made a decision of her own. Because instead of running back to comfort, my daughter chose something far more powerful that night. Angela returned home after midnight. Her feet hurt. Her hands were raw from cleaning chemicals. She sat across from me and whispered, Mom, one of the women I work with is 60. She's been cleaning offices for 20 years. She told me something I can't stop thinking about. What did she say? She said there are two kinds of people who end up doing this job, those who never had opportunities and those who destroyed the ones they were given. She swallowed. I know which one I am. That was the moment I knew the lesson had finally reached her. The next morning, Mr. Peterson called. Mrs. Brooks, he said, we have everything we need. Edward committed fraud. Your daughter can be released from all financial responsibility. I thanked him, but told him to wait. Give it a little more time, I said. Later that day, Angela came home with news. I sold the last piece of jewelry, she said quietly. I kept only Grandma's necklace and Dad's ring. I nodded. I'm using the money to pay what I can, she added, even if it's not enough. That evening, she sat beside me on the couch. Mom, she said, her voice breaking, do you hate me? The question struck deep. No, I said. I never hated you. I abandoned you, she whispered. I took everything you had and left you with nothing. I looked at her, really looked at her. You left, I said gently, but now you're here, and that matters. She cried quietly into my shoulder, not out of fear this time, but regret. The phone rang again later that night. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Peterson said, are you ready? Yes, I replied. It's time. Because the next day, my daughter would finally learn the truth, and everything she believed about me was about to change. I told Angela we had an appointment with a lawyer who might be able to help with her situation. I didn't explain much more than that. She was nervous the entire drive downtown, twisting her fingers in her lap. Mom, she said quietly, I don't have money to pay for legal advice. Just listen first, I replied. We'll figure the rest out later. Mr. Peterson greeted us warmly and invited us into his office. Angela sat on the edge of her chair, bracing herself for bad news. He placed a thick folder in front of her. Miss Brooks, he said calmly, please review these documents. As she read, her expression shifted confusion, disbelief, then shock. These say, Edward forged my signature, she whispered, that I'm not legally responsible for his debts. That's correct, Mr. Peterson replied. You're free of all financial liability. Angela looked at me, stunned. Mom, how is this possible? Who paid for this investigation? Mr. Peterson met my eyes. It was time. Your father left me more than you knew, I said softly. Much more. Angela froze. Mr. Peterson slid another folder across the desk. Deeds, bank statements, corporate records, proof of everything Robert had built in silence. Her hands trembled as she read. Angela didn't quit her job. Even after she knew the truth, even after she understood that she would never have to scrub office floors again, she kept going. Every evening, she put on her uniform, tied her hair back, and headed out the door with quiet determination. I need to finish what I started, she told me. Not for money, but for myself. I didn't argue. Something in her had changed permanently. She began paying part of the household expenses without being asked. She planned meals carefully, wasting nothing. She spoke differently now, more slowly, more thoughtfully. The arrogance that once defined her was gone, replaced by humility and purpose. One afternoon, she came home excited. Mom, she said, I've decided to go back to school. For what? I asked. Social work, she replied. I want to help women who end up where I was, abandoned, afraid, and financially trapped. I felt Robert's presence in that moment. That's a beautiful choice, okay, Cal, I said. Weeks later, Angela finished her notice at work and started volunteering at a local women's center while preparing for school. She insisted on paying for her education herself, using the money she earned, not the money I could easily give her. I need to earn my future, she said. One evening, Aurora visited and watched Angela studying at the table. She's not the same woman who left for Europe, Aurora said. You taught her something powerful. No, I replied. Life did. Later that night, Angela joined me on the porch. Mom, she said, Edward wrote to me. My heart tightened. He's in prison in France. He apologized, asked for forgiveness. And what will you do? Nothing, she said calmly. The woman who loved him doesn't exist anymore. I nodded, proud. The following weekend, we drove to the beach house together for the first time since I reclaimed it. Angela stood on the porch for a long moment, staring at the ocean. I sold this like it meant nothing, she said quietly. But now I feel Dad everywhere. She turned to me. I want to turn this place into something meaningful, a safe place for women starting over. I smiled. Your father would have loved that. As the sun set, Angela squeezed my hand. I learned something I'll never forget, she said. True love isn't rescuing someone from consequences. It's helping them grow strong enough to survive them. That night, as we drove home, I felt peace for the first time in years. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Because 6 months later, a single moment would prove that our greatest reward had nothing to do with money. 6 months later, our lives looked nothing like they had before. Angela was officially enrolled in her social work program. She studied late into the night, balancing classes, volunteering, and part-time work. She still refused to touch the money I had set aside for her future. I need to know I can stand on my own, she would say. And she meant it. Together, we opened a small foundation, nothing extravagant, focused on helping women who had been financially abandoned or trapped in abusive relationships. The beach house became a temporary shelter, a quiet place for women to rest, breathe, and rebuild. One evening, as Angela reviewed applications at the dining table, she looked up and smiled. Mom, she said, do you realize none of this would exist if you had rescued me immediately? I nodded. Some lessons only arrive when the ground disappears beneath your feet. That same week, Angela received her acceptance letter into a master's program. She ran into the kitchen holding the envelope like it was made of glass. I got in, she said, breathless, and I'm paying for it myself. I hugged her tightly. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, looking at the stars. Robert used to say they were reminders that even in darkness, something steady was always watching over us. Thank you, I whispered. You planned for everything. Angela joined me quietly. Mom, she said, I need to say something I've never said properly. I waited. When I left you at the doctor's office, I thought you were weak. I thought I was smarter, stronger, entitled to more. I was wrong. She swallowed hard. You were strong long before I ever learned how to be. I took her hand. Strength doesn't come from control, Angela. It comes from responsibility. A few days later, Aurora stopped by for tea. She looked around the house and smiled knowingly. I always suspected there was more to your story, she said, but I never imagined this. I laughed softly. Neither did I. That evening, Angela prepared dinner. Simple, thoughtful, nothing wasted. As we ate, she said something that told me everything had come full circle. I don't measure my life by what I have anymore, she said. I measure it by who I am when no one is rescuing me. And in that moment, I knew. I hadn't lost my daughter. I had raised her. Again. If this story moved you, tell me, what lesson stood out the most to you? And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone fall so they can rise stronger than ever.